Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our first LTV talk show of the semester. I'm your host, Chris Hunt, and we've got a great show prepared for you tonight. Future filmmakers are in for a treat, as our special guest has been in the industry for quite some time now. Director of Uncle Peckerhead, everyone please welcome our professor at TC&J, Matthew Lawrence. Matt, it's great to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Matt, what inspired you in the first place to work in the film industry?
Yeah, I mean, when I was younger, I always thought the film industry or Hollywood was some kind of faraway land, and nobody in my family, nobody in my network of friends had anybody that was kind of touched that industry. So I thought it was something that I had never imagined that I could do. Although, like when I grew up, instead of watching like Sesame Street or Mr. Rogers, I was watching like Ghostbusters and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So it wasn't until actually I went to TCNJ. I started as an undergrad, but I started in, I think it was like political science, but my plan was to do like pre-law. Right. And I realized that I hated law. So after my first semester, I struggled to stay motivated. So I remember just kind of like, doing kind of a check-in and thinking, what do I love? And I loved writing and I loved film. And I saw that the Communication Studies department had a small kind of radio, TV, film program. So I basically switched my major between my fall and spring semester, and that kind of ignited my love for film.
It was love at first sight.
It was love at first sight.
It's meant to be, I guess. Well, now, after all that years of education and training, your film Uncle Peckerhead has been brought up quite a lot throughout the past year with your screening and Q&A and such. Were there any films that inspired your work up at this point?
Yeah, I mean, there's certain films, there's certain filmmakers. So like one of my biggest influences is Sam Raimi, who you might know as he did the original like Spider-Man trilogy, but he made the film Evil Dead 2. He made the film Darkman. I mean, he's had kind of a storied career. So he's a big influence. John Carpenter's a big influence, director of Halloween, The Thing. And stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, generally kind of, gonzo, crazy, high energy horror films that have a comedic bent. That's generally my wheelhouse as a writer director, and those are kind of the films that kind of like, broke my brain open and made me want to make movies.
Are those like the specific elements you've taken and added into your current film?
From those directors?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Raimi's a huge influence just because I feel that, a lot of his films have this energy where, they are just kind of unrelenting in a great way. Like every 30 to 60 seconds, there's some like really kind of breathtaking camera move or just something hysterically funny or something just wild, like kind of there's moments where you're gasping or laughing out loud or, just kind of completely blown away by the formal elements of how the movie is executed. So yeah, I mean, he's definitely both in terms of style and substance a huge influence.
So you always want to have that lasting effect in your audience.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I really want to make movies that hopefully now that we're going back to the theaters, that I want to make kind of big kind of theatrical experience movies. I know, like, from going to a lot of film festivals, like what kind of made me want to make Uncle Peckerhead is I went to this one horror film festival in Colorado, and a lot of the films were kind of like just kind of downer movies. And there's always a time and a place for those type of movies, but there was no kind of wildly fun midnight movie where you're with your friends. Maybe if you're of age, you've had a couple drinks, you're just enjoying the film, and kind of there's you can hear people kind of react to the movie, and that's what I look for with the movies I make.
So going back to that, you were saying how we're going back to theaters. I'm just kind of curious about, from a filmmaker's perspective, how does that change the way you make your movies, knowing that we're going back to theaters rather than having everything come straight to like a streaming service, let's say? Does that affect the way you work in any way?
That's a good question. Yeah, it can affect the way that you work. I don't want to say unfortunately, because I don't feel I would have enjoyed the success of Uncle Peckerhead if not for streaming. But I would say the vast majority, 99% of the films produced in this day and age are not going to have a theatrical run. Theaters are closing down, but I mean, there are still elements of of theatrical that are still working and still have a workable model. So, I mean, I hope to achieve a certain status as a filmmaker where I can think about having a larger theatrical run. But for filmmakers that are kind of micro budget filmmakers like myself right now, or kind of even filmmakers that are just kind of the tier above where I'm at, your next project, there's almost a guarantee that it's going to go streaming. It's not going to have a large theatrical run. You might do a couple of cities, you might do kind of a premiere somewhere, but your film is really going to find its home on those streaming networks.
So from you personally, what do you prefer? Do you prefer to go to a movie, or do you prefer to stay at home and watch from Netflix or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I love the movie theater. I mean, it's something that I grew up with. I try to go to the movies every week. But I mean, I am also a bit of a homebody sometimes. So
aren't we all?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely a joy that you can have with both. But there's just something really special about being in this big space, especially when you're in a theater like that has like Dolby sound.
Oh
or
yeah,
that
the
big screen,
booming speakers.
Yeah.
You got the reclining chairs now.
Yeah, nothing
Heated
beats
seats
it.
even. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I mean, I'm a homebody too, but when a nice big movie's coming out, you got to go to the theater to see it.
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt.
So going back to your filmmaking, what would you say one of the biggest problems when it comes to producing your films? Are there any setbacks you really think about in pre-production, post-production, during shooting, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, micro-budget filmmaking is just nonstop putting out fires. You have limited resources for everything from your crew, just having a limited number of people that you can afford to put on payroll, to just like you only have a limited amount of cash to pay for your wardrobe, your production design, X, Y, Z. So your back is always up against the wall. So that's why, when it comes to, producing on a small budget, but really at any level, it's about preparation and making sure that you are over-prepared, that you have plans, not just B, you have plans C, D, E, F, G, and all the way down to Z. Because the one thing you have to learn when you're making movies, it doesn't matter what level, but especially when you're making them on a small budget or no budget, is you have to realize anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And you have to just adapt in the moment, and you have to be able to make peace with it's not going to be exactly as you plan. So you plan as hard as you can. Then when you enter into the actual execution, things are inevitably going to go wrong, and things are, even if they don't go wrong, are not going to exactly conform to the vision you have in your head. Now, hopefully you've done enough prep that, a certain majority makes its way to kind of manifesting itself out of your brain. But yeah, it's just kind of, making peace, being able to adapt, because I would say there's never been a day that I've been on set of my own films or films that I've worked on where something doesn't go terribly wrong, and you just kind of have to shift gears, you have to pivot. So it's just kind of really being able, I mean, that's one of the things that, I try and teach my students, is to just be able to kind of, make that peace and continue forward, not just kind of, remain like a deer in headlights or remain stagnant and not do anything. It's being able to kind of make the pivot.
It's all about improvising, adapting, and overcoming.
Yeah.
Yep. Fair enough. And then on the topic of film, out of curiosity, what is a film you really or what kind of film even? What is a film you really despise? And like, why is that? What is that one thing that really irks you about it?
Oh, man. Okay, so I won't name a certain film, because actually I've gotten, like as I've gotten older and as I've made more films, I've begun to appreciate something about any movie, usually something about any movie, but I'll hate in a second. But like I'll find something to appreciate, because movie making is so tough. And you could have the most talented people, you could have people with their heart in the right spot, people that have worked tirelessly, people that have prepared beyond belief, people that, have really been good to each other in their collaboration. And just something that's out of their hands, just the chaos of just like, life, just something took down the movie or took it down a few pegs to where like, it didn't really work. So I find that like I always try and find something that I like about movies, and I take no joy in hating on movies anymore. I used to be a lot more cynical. I still am cynical. But in terms of like something that still really irks me about movies is movies where it just really feels like everybody was just punching in and punching out.
Exactly. That's what I was going to bring up. I really can't stand how a lot of movies now are kind of these cash grab kind of things. And I was talking about before with some of our wonderful members here in LTV about how many superhero movies now are so formulaic, and then you can just really predict lines and what's going to happen in the movie way before they even come out. Yeah. And that's something that personally irks me. I wonder if that's the same for you.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, like one thing that I always say is like you can feel like the love, or you can feel like somebody's passion on screen, and it could be the filmmakers, it could be the actors, it could be everybody on crew. But you can feel when a movie's been loved on. It could be imperfect, it could have a lot of flaws, it could be okay, but you can tell when people really cared about what it is they were making. Right. But to your point, I mean, like there are some movies that just feel like people just like were just clocking in. Yep. Aiming the camera, running their lines, and then they clock out. Yep. And that's just something where it's like, to make movies is such like a privilege and a joy, and not many people get to do it. Yeah. And to be given the opportunity and to just like squander it, or just like half-ass it and put no love on it. Mm-hmm. It just breaks my heart. It gets me pissed.
Yeah, I don't blame you. It does to me too. There's been many times where I sit in the movie theater and I feel like I'm just gripping the seat, going, why? Yeah. Star Wars did that for me. Everybody back at home, the newest ones, but. Let's go on the flip side of that. What's a film you really love and why? Like maybe perhaps from one of the directors you mentioned earlier?
Yeah. Man, it should come as no surprise, but like I love movies. Like if I had the time, I would probably watch 2 or 3 movies a day. So what I think about movies I love, like I'll give you one that is like kind of in my all-time top 3 is this movie Wayne's World. And there's so many reasons why I love the movie. One is it's based on an SNL skit from the 90s. Right. And you think about a comedy based on an SNL skit is probably not going to be really good, right? Like how can you stretch out kind of a basic 2-minute concept into a feature-length film? And the movie is so lovingly written, so lovingly made. It is so clearly, whoever wrote it put so much love into the characters. The way in which the characters play, the actors play these characters is so kind of pitch perfect. It is a film that has like a lot of thematic stuff to mine. It is like a movie that has really kind of deep like meditations on stuff. Yeah. And it's hysterically funny. It's incredibly made, like formally for a comedy. It's not like the style isn't so loud that it takes away from the comedy, but it's clearly not just kind of like a shot, reverse shot, just kind of like a basic setup. It is so kind of like cleverly kind of executed, and it still holds up. It's a film that like is at least, I would say, it's close to 30 years old right now. Yeah, and it is still. A film that I feel I still use some examples in class. I'm going to use an example of it in my screenwriting class tonight. And I feel it still resonates. It still is a film that kind of like feels like kind of timeless. So it is kind of like a comfort film that I watch at least a couple times a year.
I personally haven't seen it, but you're making me want to go watch it now.
Chris, you got to watch it. Yeah.
Well, before we wrap things up today, Matt, I just wanted to ask you, what's the best piece of advice you can give to our wonderful future filmmakers or LTV members here, or even in general, any sort of radio, film, television student at the College of New Jersey?
Yeah, there's so much advice to give. So I'll try to boil it down to a few things. One is that the one thing that takes a lot of time to kind of wrap your mind around, and I'm still wrapping my mind around it, is because it clashes with kind of how we've been brought up as a culture, in that filmmaking or a lot of art is never perfect. There's never a perfect movie. And what's really tough is we're used to, like, our society is brought up on this idea that either it's right or it's wrong. It's this binary thing. And when it comes to, especially filmmaking as an art form, it's about growth. And I think that's really that's a tough idea to wrap your mind around. It's something I love. I love the idea that I never just will like hopefully I'll never just plateau, you know, like I don't, you never figure it out fully, you know, like I'll watch my latest thing that I've produced and I'll cringe because there's like a laundry list of things wrong. And I feel that scares a lot of people. So I think, you know, if one thing I'd say is to embrace that idea that, you know, there's something beautiful that you can continue working in this industry.
You
or
can always
in this
be
art
growing
form,
and learning as you go.
and you're always going to grow. You're always going to learn. And the other thing is, you know, this industry is all about failure. So like, you know, I enter, you know, 12 script competitions, I place in 2. That means I get told 10 times that my script sucks. You know, maybe not sucks, but my script isn't worthy. And I feel a lot of people stop at that point. But you have to understand, like, it's the little gains that you get. You know, if you do place in that one competition, you get to go to maybe that competition or that festival. Maybe you meet somebody. Maybe that person asks you to send their script to them, right? So it doesn't matter that you got rejected from those 11 or 10, because there's still an opportunity to kind of seize. And if you get rejected from all 12, guess what? You can still work on the script, submit next year, and then you maybe get in. So I think it's just this idea of don't be afraid to fail, don't be afraid to fall. And I feel that, you know, if your heart's in the right place, and if you're a nice person, and if you're willing to kind of work to make your stuff better, to improve, you're gonna see the light of day. It's gonna take you a little bit longer. But it's one of the most, this industry can be so fun, you know, watching kind of the crew here at LTV kind of working together in unison. There's something really special that, like, you can't make a movie alone, or you can't make a television show alone. You have to collaborate with people, which really forces you to get to know other people, to be nice, to be empathetic. It helps you to improve not just in your skill set as a filmmaker and an artist, it helps you to grow as a human, which I think is like one of the things that the older I get, the more I'm just like, man, I just want to make people feel better. I want to like make people feel more loved. So I think that's why like filmmaking is such an amazing thing, because you have to ponder about those things too.
That's perfect. If our audience back home isn't ready to run through a brick wall and start making films right now, I don't know what's going to get them to do it.
Hell yeah.
Well, Matt, I'm afraid we're out of time here, but thank you so much for popping in and joining us. And thank you to our wonderful audience here today. This has been a great show. Don't forget to subscribe to TC&J Alliance Television on YouTube for more content. And thanks again for watching. This has been the LTV Talk Show with Chris Hunt, and we'll see you next time.